Okay, so in the SAC planning workspace, inside the solutions folder, there is a new folder, data actions. So inside it, we have three models basically. So we discussed about the copy across model, right? So I have some models now where we can see the data action which copies across model. So the idea is we have a HR model in which we do all the planning related to full-time employees, the labor hours, the labor cost, etc. And then there is a consolidation model, which is a expense model. So across the business, different expenses are planned in that model. So if in the consolidation model, in the expense model, if they have to get this labor cost, then they can get it from the HR plan model. Like this, there can be business scenarios, where you do different level of plannings in different models, and then you have to copy this data from one planning model to another planning model for consolidation, right? So that is a scenario we are going to look at now. So we have a story also. So I will walk you through the data actions first, and then what I would want you to do is you can create a copy of this story the way you are doing in your public folder or something, right? And then in the copied story, you can try it out what we are discussing, right? So we have 3 pages or 4 pages. This is just an overview page. So we have 3 pages. Let me get rid of that. Yeah. So in this 3 pages, in the first page, we have the table from the HR model, basically. So here we have the labor hours and labor rate. So these are two accounts. So one is the labor hours where we'll put in some hours. And then we have something called as labor rate where we'll put hourly rates for each of this department, right? And then we have the entire 2020 year, which is unplanned. So first we are going to create a simple data action, which we have already seen, to copy the data from maybe 1 year to year or a month to month or from one account to account, something like that. So we'll create a data action which will do a data copy within the model, right? And then once we have populated this model, this uh, HR plan model. So now the second scenario we are going to look at is this one, labor and expense. So here it is a different model, expense planning model, right? So in here, we also need the labor hours data, right? For all these cost centers, accounting, admin, everything. So whatever we have planned here, it needs to be moved to this model. So we will create another data action, which is going to copy data from model 1 to model 2, right? And then that data, running that data action should populate the labor hours here, right? So that is the scenario. So what you can do is you can take a copy of this story and then you can start working with it. So the first thing we are going to do is we only have an actual version. So let's create a copy of it. So I'm calling it plan and I'm copying all data. Okay. So this will create me a private version, which is here. Okay. So this private version, I want to make it public. So I'm going to versions and publish as, and I'm publishing under the same name. And I will call it forecast. Right. So I have published it. So now I have a version where I can enter my plans. I don't want actual anymore. So I'm going to filter it out. Okay. So now we have created a version. And then this is the first step you can do also. So in the actual, you just make a copy of it and create your own plan versions. And in the plan versions, use your initials or name so that everyone will be using the same model. So you can identify your plan versions, right? Okay. So now let's enter some data for the month Jan. So I'm entering some random data. So can you suggest me a way for me to do this quicker? Because now I'm entering, and each time I enter, it takes some seconds before it reloads, right? So can anyone suggest me a better way to do this? Yeah, we have mass data entry. So that way I don't have to wait every time I have to enter something. Okay, so I have entered all that I want. Now, if you see, we are still in mass data mode. That's why the plan is not reflecting in the year and all. So it has not reached the backend yet. So as soon as I click the process data, yeah, so now the data is reflecting in the year level also. So now we have only planned for the month of Jan 2020. So let me save that plan. I go to version management and publish. Okay, so our plan is saved now. So what if we wanted to create similar plans, similar plan numbers for all the months? Because it's labor cost, we are not expecting much of a fluctuation. So we want to plan the similar numbers. One way is, yes, we can go ahead and we can start copying and pasting the same numbers in all the cells. But the other way is we can create a data action that does the copy for us, right? So let me create a data action. So I'm going to data actions. So there are two ways to go to this data action. So one is directly going to the data action. And if we go like this, we have to choose a model from the drop down, or you can go to a model, right? So I have the HR plan model. And from here, if I go to the quick actions menu, there also I can go to a data action. So if I go like this, the model will be pre-selected for me, right? Okay. So now we want to create, copy data. Okay, so let's create some parameters. So we need basically two parameters to create the copy rule. So if we go to the copy step, so there is a copy rule. So here we are going to copy across date. So you can all try to copy across anything, uh, any personal account or anything, but we are going to try to copy across dates. So here, if I want to put some from date and to date, if I directly put select a member, it becomes hard coded, and then the data action is not parameterized. So if I want to parameterize it, I have to create parameter. So I'm creating two parameters. So one is the source month, and that is of type date. And here I have to be careful to choose single, because the source filter in the copy rule will allow only single. I'll show you that. So we have created one parameter called source month. And let's create one more one more parameter, which we will call target month. So here I'm saying target months because the target can accept multiple values. So I am also saying any here. Right. So we have created our two parameters. Now let's go to the copy step. And if you see in the from dialog, so here itself in the member selection itself, you just see radio buttons, right? Whereas here, if you go, you see checkboxes. Right? That's one clue that this accepts only single, this accepts multiple. And the other thing is you can go to parameters, and here you will see only parameters with the following settings are shown. Here also it says only cardinality single will be listed here. So that's why target month is not getting shown here, right? So I'm selecting my source month, and here I go. And here, if I go to parameters, here it will allow any cardinality. So it's showing both. Now here I want target months. Yeah. So other than that, our version is directly, getting filtered by the target version parameter, which is default. When you create a copy step, the system creates that for you. Other than that, we need a couple of filters. So one thing is we are only working with 2020 data. So let me filter that. And we are working only with labor hours and labor rate. And that, okay, let's filter cost centers to all cost centers and personal area to Americas, right? So that is the setup I want to do for my data action, right? So now the copy rule I'll set. So everything is set. We have the data action to copy ready, right? So now we can go back to our story and we can add a planning trigger. So I go to more and add a planning trigger. Here I select data action trigger. So copy HR data between months. Okay. I'll select that data action. And here I see all the prompts that we entered there. So target version, source month, target month, etc. And I can put some text here. Okay. So now we have our data action ready and I'm trying to run it. So first thing we want to select is a version. So I'm selecting this forecast ROM version here. Okay. And second thing is the source month from where to copy. So we have to select Jan. Selecting Jan. And the third thing is I want to select where to copy. So I want to basically copy to every month. And here is a problem, right? So if I select something like this, Q2, Q3, Q4, and here I selected Feb and March, right? If I try to do that, it will give an error because the parameter setting doesn't allow, selection like this across, months and quarters. So I'm deleting all those. And uh, this list of values that are shown in this parameter can be controlled from the parameter setting itself. So if you if you go to the target parameter, target months parameter, we see a property called hierarchies and we have selected any. So instead of any, if I say year month, then we'll see a difference. Let's save this. Okay. Let's save this and let me go back to the story, cancel, do a refresh. Let me run it again. So if you see here, it's directly now listing the months and I can select whatever months I want to copy the data to. So I want to copy it to all months except Jan. So I'm copying it. So if we run this data action now, it should copy the data from Jan across all the months. And this data action we have already seen, right? So copying within the model, we have already seen. So this is how you will be planning in one model. So we have planned in model A now. So I'm publishing the data. So now we have planned for labor hours and labor rate. And we have seen how to use a simple data action with some parameters to copy within the model itself, right? So next we are going to copy this plan from model A, which is HR plan model, to another model, expense model. But before that, yeah, take few minutes, maybe take 10 minutes, and then copy this story and create your own version. Like forecast RAM, you create your own forecast version and do this exercise. You enter some values in some month or copy it across using different parameters, etc. Try it out, and if you have any questions, ask me and we'll screen share and we'll discuss that. So I'm putting the data action on the screen. So these are the settings we have done. Okay. So everyone done? Anyone needs more time? Any questions? Okay. So now we have data in HR plan model and we want data to be copied to the expense model, right? So in expense, we need the labor hours. So we need to copy data from the HR plan to the expense model. Now let's see how to create a data action for that, right? So again, I'll go to the expense plan model because this is going to be our target. So from here, I'm going to create a data action. So my model is already selected, right? So I'm just saying copy HR data to expense plan. Right? Okay. Now we can go ahead and we can add a copy step and we can select the second model also. Why we are selecting now itself is we want to create some parameters. For that we want the second model as well, right? So I'm going to this and solutions data actions and our explain HR plan model. So now we have our source model and target model and we want to create a couple of parameters. So first parameter being here, if you see, it wants to select which version to copy from the source model, right? So that instead of hard coding it to some version here, we want to create a parameter for that. So I'm creating that first. So I go here and I create a parameter which is called source version. And this we want to choose from the source model. Now it is pointing to the target model, which is the default model. So we have to choose the HR plan model, which is the source model. And then dimension, I want to choose version. Cardinality, automatically it became single, and prompt I'll give a space. Yeah. So we have one parameter set. Let's go back to copy data action and let's see what else is missing. So we'll map that parameter now here. So we'll copy from source version. So that is set. Okay. So now we want to create some filters, right? So the first filter I want to do is a particular year or month. Again, whether I want to hard code it or I want to create a parameter, it is up to us. So if we want to that to also be parameterized so that this data action is reusable, then that is totally fine. We'll create another parameter for this year and month, and then we'll use that. So it's basically up to us. And here let's check what's okay. Let me go back. Let's add a filter to our account. We want to copy only labor hours. So I'm filtering that out, right? So as soon as I filter that out, this account error got fixed. And that is because in both the models, the account dimension was very different, right? In HR model, we had FTE, full-time employees, labor hours, and labor rates. Whereas in the expense model, we had a lot of different expenses, right? The only thing that is the two things that will match are labor hours and labor rates, but labor rates we'll use later in one of our steps to calculate the expenses as a lookup. But here we are just copying the data from HR plan to expense plan, and we want to only copy labor hours. So I filter that out. Okay. And then I want to filter out some personal areas because we are only planning for Americas. I'm filtering that out as well. And cost center, I want all cost centers. I'll filter that also. So all these areas where we are applying filters, they can all be parameterized. There is no stopping you there. If you want to try something using a parameter, yes, go ahead and try it. Right? Just make sure that account you filter it to labor hours because that is the main scenario here. We are just copying labor hours details from one model to another. So that keep it constant. All the other things you can go ahead and explore with the parameter if you want. Right? And then we see some unmapped dimensions. So one is the currency dimension, another is cost center dimension. And in the source model also, we see some unmapped dimensions. So one is personal area and another is cost center. So this can happen between any two models if we try to copy. Again, as a rule, in the source model, you can leave any number of dimensions unmapped. That is not an issue. But in the target model, you have to map it to something. Necessarily, you don't have to map it to some source dimension. You can map it to either a default value or something, right? So I'm mapping the cost center to cost center because they match. Here currency, we don't have any currency dimension in the source model. So I am just mapping the currency as unassigned a constant value, right? So this is my setting basically. So I have put the option also to override mode, override mode. Okay, now that is good. So if I want to filter the date constantly, I can do that. I can go ahead and I can apply 2020, but let us add a parameter just. So now you tell me I want to add a parameter for filtering date, right? So which model should I choose here? Expense model or HR model? HR model is my source. Expense is my target. So what model should I choose while creating a parameter to apply a filter for this date dimension? Anyone?
HR.
Yes. So we want to filter all the filters here. They are getting applied in the source, right? So that is you are filtering the source and then you are bringing in that slice of data. So we have to create a parameter in HR month and the model is HR. Yeah, remember to switch the model. By default, it will select the target. You have to switch it. Okay, date and cardinality should be single and hierarchy should be year month. Okay, so we have created it. So just for the sake of it, I'm just adding another date in date wrong, I'll call it, right? So this is in expense plan. I'm just selecting the date and cardinality single, hierarchy a month, right? And I've created that parameter as well. Now if we go here and select the filter and date and go to parameters, see here it only shows the year month parameter in the source model. And previously this was confusing. Now at least SAP has added this nice message where if you don't find some parameters, you will exactly know from this message what will appear here, right? So as soon as you see the model HR plan, even if you have created a parameter and it's not appearing here, then you can know that, okay, I created maybe for the wrong model. Or if the cardinality also not right, it will also show here the cardinality should be single, something like that. So always read this message, that can help you. Okay? So now we have all set for this copy data action. So we can save this and go back to our story. So now before I add a planning trigger and I run that data action in this model, I want to do something. So in this table, I want to do something that is going to be the target of that data action. Can anyone guess what? So what should we do next basically in the expense plan? We need to create a target, right? So we need to create some place where it can write the data. So I'm creating a forecast, copying all data from, I mean, there is nothing in actual, we can say blank also. Okay, so I'll publish it. And let's filter that out. Okay. So now we have labor hours, benefits, and labor in EUR, all of that here. And let's add a planning trigger. What did we call? Copy HR to expense. Okay. And we can add some. Okay. So now we have all these parameters here. So let's run this data action. So it wants a target version. So let's select a target version, which is forecast ROM. And it wants a source version. Again, that is also forecast ROM. And it wants a year or month. So I'll select 2020 whole year. And let's run it. So it copied the data from this model, the HR plan model, right from here to here. And that's how we do, copy across models. So take your time, go ahead and create this scenario and try it out. So yeah, just make sure that you just keep creating a different version and then keep using that version. So and have your initials or something in the version so that you don't step on each other, right? And I only see that only one version was created called PS. So I think only one of you tried it. So take the next 15 minutes or something and then try it out. If you haven't done the first part also, yeah, go ahead and do it. And do the second part also where you copy across model. And let me know if you have any questions. Okay, so we have seen the copy across model data action, right? So anyone, any questions? Did you try it? Okay,
Yeah,
so yeah,
I'm
yeah, go
having a
ahead.
question in the cross model copy, can we able to copy the data from analytical model to a planning model, or only it happens between planning to planning?
It only happens between, I have only tried between planning to planning,
Mm.
but let's check that. Yeah. So I think it only allows planning to be a source model. Let's check that out. Samples. Yeah, I don't have your public folder basically.
Yeah, okay, we'll check that.
Yeah, I will check that. Yeah, sure. You can also check it. Okay. So now let's see how we can do lookups, right? So now we have seen that we can read, data using copy data action to read some data which is in different model and bring it to the current model. What if you just don't want to, copy the model? I mean, copy the data from model A to model B, but maybe on the fly you want to look up some values just for doing some calculation or something. So if you look closely, so here we have something called as labor in euros, right, which is the labor cost. That's what we are trying to do in this model. It's a expense planning model. So we are planning the expenses. So for calculating this labor cost, we need to know the labor hours and the labor rate. So labor hours, we just copied it using the copy across data action, right? So now we have labor hours locally in the model, whereas the labor rate, if you remember, it is in the HR model, right? So in the HR model, you see the labor rate is present. So each cost centers have their own labor rate, right? So now we have to do some calculation, like for example, for the accounting department, if we want to calculate the labor cost, we want to multiply this 10,000 in this model with something else like this 120 in the HR plan model, right? So we want to do a basically a lookup, and that to lookup across models, right? So how do we do that? Let's see that. For that also we are going to use a data action, and in data action there
Yeah,
is
in the
a
expression, we can link models.
yes,
Yes.
exactly. In the advanced formula in the expressions we can link models. Yes. So yeah, if you read the API developer guide for the formulas in SAC, you will also see that there is a formula called link. So let's create a data action to do that now. So again, I'm going to the expense planning model. From here, I'll jump to the data action. Okay, so now let's call this data action labor cost calculation. So we have created a data action. Let's add the advanced formula step. Okay, so now we want to do certain filtering, and then we want to do certain linking, right? Basically, we have some data in this model. For example, the labor hours is already in the model, but the labor rate we want to get from the HR plan model, right? So that's what we want to do. So basically, we are going to do in this formula is we are going to calculate the labor cost, which is going to be labor hours. So labor is going to be labor hours into rate, right? Where the labor hours is local and the rate is coming from something else, coming from the HR model basically, right? So here for simplicity, the filtering we'll do directly as the year itself. But if you still want to practice parameters, you can go ahead and do that. But I'm just filtering it locally. So all cost centers and currency, I'm filtering to euros because I want this data action, whatever it calculates and writes back, I want it to write back to this particular currency, right? So that's why I'm setting this in the context. Okay. Now I have two ways to create this formula. One is I can use the visual editor and I can go ahead and create the formula, or the other is I can go ahead and create using the script editor. So last time when we were doing the advanced formula, we used the visual editor. So like this time, let's do the scripting, right? So automatically some scripts were already generated, and this is for all the filters that we have set, right? So whatever we have set here, these are called member set. And so member setting is filtering. So we have date filter, we have cost center filter, and we have currency filter, right? So now we want to uh, write data to a particular account, which is the labor account. So what I'm typing data and it proposes something. So I'm pressing enter. So then when I use the square bracket, it shows all the dimensions. I want the account dimension and I have to type equals. And again, if I press control space, it brings up the pop-up. So I'm not typing anything here because that can be error prone. So just start typing data, it comes up and I can read also what it does, right? So writing value, create record based on the scope, right? So I want to write back to a particular account. So I'm using this. And as soon as I'm inside that, I'm just putting a square bracket, choosing a particular dimension. And again, to filter the value, again, I'm not going to type anything. I'm just putting equals and then pressing control space, right? That brings up this pop-up. And I want to write to this labor account, right? So I'm writing to the labor account. That's all. So now what I have done is I have created the place where the data is going to be written, right? So now what is on the right hand side will be the calculation, which will get resolved and the value will be written here. So in this equation, we have done the left side part of it. Now we have to calculate the right part of it. In right side, we have again two parts. So one is we have to get the hours from the local model itself, and into we have to get the rates from another model. So let's see the local model. So there is something called as result lookup. right? So if you read the definition of it, returns a data set of corresponding specified dimension value filtered by the formula. So which is nothing but in the current model, if you want to filter something and return the results, you can use this, right? So I'm using result lookup, and again, I'm going to just type square bracket, all the dimensions are listed. I'm selecting account. Again, I'm putting equals and pressing control space, right? So here I want the labor hours. So I'm typing labor hours, right? So I can leave it like this, labor hours, but I want to be a little more specific, because if you remember last time when we copied the data across models, I did a mapping in the copy rule where I said the currency to unassigned, right? So whatever I was copying from HR plan model to this current model, I have put all those values in a particular currency, which is unassigned, right? So that is another filter I can add here. So I'm basically adding the currency filter now. I'm going to currency, again putting equals and pressing control space, and I can choose unassigned. Okay, so now we have the value of labor hours. So this part also we have got, and this coming from the current model itself, which is fine, right? And I want to multiply that by something which is not in the model. So I want to multiply that by the rate, which is in a different model. Now for that, like Pavitra mentioned, there is a formula called link, right? So if you hover over the link, it says returns the data set from another model corresponding to a specified dimension value. So all this corresponding to a specified dimension value basically means filtering, right? So when you said result lookup, it said the same thing. For link also, it is saying the same thing. So basically, result lookup is you selecting some values from the current model. Link, you selecting values from a different model or a linked model, right? So I'm linking it. So the first parameter here is the model name we have to give. And for that, you just have to press control space. You don't type the model name or anything. As soon as it puts your cursor inside the link, you just press control space. You get this pop-up, and then you can select your model from here. So I'm selecting HR plan model. Okay, so now we are in the HR plan model. So what do we have to do? We have to select the rate. So rate is a account. So I'm selecting square bracket, again going to account, equal sign, control space, and I want rate, right? So I have selected rate. So do I have to apply any other filters? Yes, I have to apply a filter to select the version of my whichever plan version I want to copy. So I want to select the version also. So I'm just selecting the version dimension here, equal sign, control space, and I'm selecting forecast RAM. Okay. So now I have labor rate and from a particular version, and I also want to filter it down to a particular personal area, because so far we have been only doing the plans for a particular areas only. So if you want, we can add that also here as a filter, or if we don't want, we can skip that. It's up to us, right? So now we have created this formula, which is labor cost is equal to labor hours into rate. So now let's validate. Okay, so it's asking me to plan for my personal. Yeah, because it's not here, the personal area. Okay, so it is asking me to select because in our current model, we don't have that. So I have to filter it so that it gets only one personal area. Okay, so that is my entire formula, right? So we could have done this also visually. So let's look at the visual editor now and see how it looks like, right? So it looks like this, target equal to source into source, something like that, right? So if you see here, this card addition icon. So if you click that, you get three options. So one is source scope, another is a mathematical expression, and then input field, right? So when you choose source scope, it is basically where you can select the model and some filter in the model, right? So the model by default is your local model. You can also go ahead and change that model basically to something else as a link also. So in the local model, if I want to do some filtering, like how we did there. So if I want to get the labor hours, right, then I can go here and then say labor. That's one filter. And then if I want to do, currency filter, unassigned, that's another filter basically. Okay. So this is what we do visually, and the same thing we did in the script, right? So it's up to you. For simple things, you can create visually as well as a script. But once you get used to the script and used to all that, the context sensitive help that SAC provides, it becomes much easier to do that in the script than in the than visually. So that's why I prefer that. So I'm pinging you this formula just for your reference in the chat. You can use that and you can try it out also. So I've pinged you that. Okay, so let's go ahead, save this, and then let's try it in our story. Okay, so save. Let me just validate. Yeah, no errors. Okay. So we have our story, and let's add a planning trigger. What did we call it? Labor cost. Okay, so let's run it. So we want to select a target version, which is our forecast RAM. So I'm selecting that and I can run it. Okay, so if you see here, it has calculated the cost for each cost centers, right? So we have 10,000 labor hours. And if we look at the labor rate for accounting, it is 120, right? For Jan 2020, 120 and 10,000. So it calculated 120 into 10,000 and it has placed this value here, right? So this data action, we can do several improvements. Like for example, here we have hard coded certain things. For example, the version from the HR plan model we are choosing, the forecast RAM is hard coded. If we want to parameterize it, we can parameterize it also. So whenever you run it, it asks for that parameter and then it calculates that, right? So here is one thing I want you to try either now or as a as assignment and then come back today, uh, come back tomorrow. That's also fine. So now go ahead and try this and try the lookup and link and calculate this value. And for calculating this benefits value, what I want you to try is create another step in the data action in the advanced formula, right? So in the visual editor, you can go and you can add more calculations if you want, or you can add a separate data action also, or you can create a new data action also, which is also fine. I just want you to calculate benefits. So benefits is going to be this labor cost into some factor. That factor you can take it as a parameter. So just a numeric parameter. You create some numeric parameter. So here you choose the type as numeric and then you just say benefit percentage and use that. Basically just your formula will be labor cost into that parameter should be populated here, right? So do this two things. So one, you try it out, whatever I demoed you just now. And then this we have already seen in the last time when we saw the advanced formula step we have seen. It's a very simple step. So you can go ahead and try that out also. Yeah, take the next 15 minutes or 13 minutes and try it out. If you have any questions, just ask me and I'll help you. Okay, so yeah, that's all for today. So we saw three things today. So one is a simple data action to copy within a model, to copy a data slice to another data slice within a model. And then we saw another data action to copy across model, right? So you have microcubes and then you have consolidation cubes. So you plan in microcubes and then you move that plan to the consolidation cubes using the copy data, right? And then sometimes you just have to refer some value from an external cube, but you don't have to copy that value, right? In that case, we saw advanced formula, how to refer a value from a different cube using a link, right? So these three data actions we saw today, and I have asked you to create another step or another data action to just calculate the benefit. So benefit is just going to be this labor cost into some percentage, right? So you create a data action and a parameter inside the data action. That parameter is of type number, and then multiply the labor cost into that number. And whenever you run that data action, it should populate this benefits in euros, right? So you do that today, and then tomorrow, maybe in the first 5 minutes when people are joining, if someone of you has completed it, you can share your screen and you can show it to me. And then I have seen some of the stories and dashboards you have created in the system, and some of them looks really good. And I would like to give some tips to you. So I'll give that tomorrow on how to create stories and the charts and everything, right? Not necessarily related to planning. In general, SAC related tips and tricks I'll show you. Only if some of you have the interest, to complete this today and then present it tomorrow, right? So in the first few minutes when people are joining, we can do that.